And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Barbara. Barbara is the principal of Davidson River School. Davidson River is a trauma-informed school, and she's going to talk more about what that means. And she's going to share with us why we need to learn more about being trauma-informed and how we at the community college can support our students more effectively with this information. This session is going to run until 4 o'clock. Please stay on for as long as you're able, and be sure to include questions in the chat so that she can address them when she's able to get to them. And I'll keep my eye on the chat as well, Barbara.
Sure, thank you.
Right. Thank you.
I do appreciate when your screen's on, just because I'm such a verbal processor and love to see faces. So that's one of the things. I appreciate that. But okay, so let's get started. If you didn't have time to talk about your big why, just be thinking about that, because it'll kind of weave through our story today. So I am the principal of Davidson River. This is my 5th year there. The school is and I definitely want to thank you for taking time out today, because it's just hard. It's hard to set aside time for things that are, but I feel like it'll be valuable, and know that it's an important thing for us to talk about. So my school is a 9th through 12th grade school, and its average population is about 85. So my kids come to us when they're court involved, when they're truant, when they have significant mental health issues and need a smaller setting, or they would be unable to graduate with their cohort. So if they're too many credits behind for whatever reason. Their stories are really complex and very deep. And so I asked you to share with me your big why, because again, when things get tough, it helps to know that you understand why you're doing what you're doing and what's at stake. It influences sort of the way we move forward. And that's what happened to me. So I got here and I quickly saw that there were that mental health was huge. Of course, we all went through the pandemic, and all of a sudden we realized, man, these kids are not okay. They're just not okay. In August of 2019, I was really looking for something that had the power to change the culture, that had the power to get us all speaking the same language. Because, how often have you done a PD that's like this, okay, we're going in for an hour, but it doesn't have it doesn't make systemic change. So I got connected with these guys, didn't know it was sort of their first year of doing this. They'd been doing different work for a long time, but becoming trauma skilled was new for them. So I got in. I love being a guinea pig. And then by 2021, when we got finished, we realized that things had significantly changed. All of a sudden, we were dealing with kids from trauma in a similar manner. We were talking the same language. Our mindsets about kids who experienced trauma had really changed. And so today I'm just really going to share with you a few of the things we learned and what we've learned over the few years of really focusing on kids. You don't have this as much as I do, but I would say 90% of my kids who have faced significant trauma. That's why they're here. You won't have that kind of captive audience, but for me, it was crucial that I make some changes. So as teachers in today's classroom, we see traumatized students every day. Many of our students from Transylvania County are not only experiencing these traumatic events frequently, but it's part of their everyday lives. Some of the things that they've experienced are unimaginable. And once we started talking and hearing stories about these kids, we knew that there wasn't going to be this quick fix. My counselor, I say her greatest gift, she was the school support person of the year this year. Her greatest gift is that she can get a story from a kid within 15 minutes of talking. And I'm saying deep stories that these kids have, and they will repeatedly say, all on their own, I've never told that to anybody. So I'm really fortunate to have someone who can ask the right questions and have the right listening ear that can get to the depth of some of our stories. So we've heard what's happened to these things, but So as educators, we often haven't been trained, right, to respond to this trauma. We make mistakes in thinking that all of the challenging behavior, the truancy, the laziness, the willfulness, the disrespect, that all of those are just, are just kids being who they are, right? That's just poor behavior and it needs to stop. But many of us don't realize that these students developed those behaviors for survival and self-protection because they're unhealthy experiences that have been a part of their everyday life. So talking to students in these moments, it happened to me at least 4 times today, requires very careful navigation, right? It's important to refuse to take their behaviors personally while still maintaining compassion without judgment. That is not a small task, right? That's really tough. So as educators, we have to realize that we have to meet a student's need, and I'm going to talk about this a lot today, for safety and connection before learning or reasoning can occur. And I'm going to talk to you a good bit about why that's true. So in the context of education today, it's time to reframe our narrative a little bit about the process of teaching and learning. But I want to assure you that there is one statement I think we can all agree on. We are educators, not mental health providers. So I want you to know that that's the place I come from. I think that's been the biggest block to people learning a lot more about trauma and becoming more skillful in managing trauma, because as educators, we can do a lot to impact students, learning, and behavior. And we can work collaboratively to work with our colleagues to change environments or create environments that are supportive. But it would be a huge stretch for us to expect to be able to reach into these families to change their narratives, right? So I think, when we talk about trauma, we've got to be careful that that's not what we're expecting educators to do, right? So helping trauma impacted students be the first generation to graduate from college or to obtain certification for meaningful employment, those are our goals, right? That can go a long way in helping the next generation. As educators, we have to begin to understand the ways that trauma impacts behavior and learning, and we can leave the therapy to the mental health providers. Is that a fair place to come from? So before we get into the idea of trauma and how it plays out in your classroom, we need to talk a little bit about our mindsets. Those are the things that kind of makes or breaks us when we're dealing with kids who've had a lot of trauma. So it's about the set of beliefs that shape how we sense the world and how we manage our own selves, right? So let's imagine that you're in the front of the classroom and 1 or 2 kids, or groups of students, are continuing to chat and they're off task as you start teaching. So regardless of how many times you try to get their attention, they continue to drift back towards talking and ignoring you. So there are 2 different ways we can look at that, right? And we do it, I do it every day, right? So mindset A, we call a fixed mindset. Again, if I'm just gonna hit these high points so it won't take, so if you're really familiar with growth and fixed mindset, I'm just gonna bounce off and go on. So I don't want you to kind of like, oh, I know all this. So let's look at the fixed mindset. So this fixed mindset person says, hey, these kids are out of control. I don't know how much more of this I can take. They refuse to listen and they don't care about the content. Why are they even here? If they won't stop talking, how am I supposed to teach them? That's fixed mindset. Growth mindset might say something like, I need to find a way to connect with them and see if I can better understand what the block is. I want to help them become more productive learners and be able to pass this class. I wonder if there's a way to adapt my lesson to provide greater engagement. Every time we stand up to teach, our mindsets affect the outcomes. When we're struggling with a student or a parent or a colleague, a team, a supervisor, or something that happened to us at home, it's important to become aware of our mindsets and self-talk so we can engage in a more positive manner. So, for example, I can ask these questions or questions like this. Am I open to the possibility that this situation will get better, or am I just really stuck on the problem? We had a conversation just a few minutes ago. A kid wanting to be removed from a classroom because of some of the things that other kids were doing, on and on and on, right? So how am I going to deal with that? I could just remove him and let him work independently. Or I can help him to help others, right? So it's about how are we looking at the problem? What is about to drive my behavior? How am I going to respond? Am I responding because I think they're being disrespectful to me? Or am I looking at what's beneath that? Am I using my growth mindset, or am I closing myself off to solutions? What's the goal of this interaction? In the best case scenario, what would happen as a result? Now, that's an awful lot to ask ourselves when something occurs in our classrooms, but it's certainly something that we begin to work on. And as we work on those, then it changes the way we respond to kids, especially kids in trauma. Now, I know with my students that I work with not to engage in any kind of a verbal battle when there's an audience. Never, just don't do it. I also never back a kid into a corner so they don't feel there's a safe way out. I also always make sure I give them a voice to tell me what's going on. If a student isn't sure where they're going to sleep that night, or afraid they might come home to a mom OD'd on the floor, it makes it very difficult to listen to what's going on in your business class. So with those with whom we are struggling, when those with whom we are struggling see us as motivated to meet them halfway, it sends a message to them that we want things to get better. Trauma impacted students will respond to those who they know really care. It may not look the same as your star students' responses, but you'll know when you've connected. How you engage students in your daily mindset about behaviors can make a huge difference in the way the students respond to you. For me, since I know their stories, it's easy for me to see the pain that happens behind it and respond in ways that are more appropriate. So, what is trauma? Trauma results from exposure to an incident or series of events that are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening, with lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, and/or spiritual well-being. So there are basically three kinds of trauma. You've got acute trauma, which results from a single incident. So that's something like a wreck, a medical emergency, a natural disaster. It could be a physical assault or a rape. A chronic trauma is repeated and prolonged. Those are things such as child abuse, neglect, bullying, domestic violence. And then finally, you have complex trauma, which is exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events, often very invasive and interpersonal. So most of my kids at Davidson River are the products of chronic or complex trauma. They have parents who have substance abuse issues, they're absent, they have faced molestations, physical and emotional abuse and neglect. They may have situations at school that have caused trauma. When they go and get into relationships that cause additional trauma and they repeat those same cycles, right? So to that point, two students in Mr. Colgrove's English class decided to create a podcast project. Now, this is something that is way over the top for our kids. And on the challenges they face, and it's pretty remarkable for a first-time effort. I wanted you to hear just a couple of their stories. As you listen, I want to let you know that these are 14 to 15-year-olds, and it's their very first podcast. So if you hear like a giggle doesn't seem appropriate, it's nerves, and it's kind of, So let me get rid of this here. Okay. I'm sorry, I think it's this one. Let's see, on the remake. Yeah, okay.
Barbara, we're not hearing anything.
Oh, you're not? Okay. I guess I can, how can I get that audio to you? Oh, I hate if you can't hear that. Oh, a new
So-
share. Sorry.
Yep.
Let me
new
just do
share,
that and see.
And
Yeah.
then click the share audio when you do the new share. There's usually a little button that says share audio that's underneath the option when you click the window.
Okay, that's. Hear that? No, still no.
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'm sorry. I guess I won't share audios it's under the,
So if you stop sharing for a minute and then go back to share again,
I see it, share sound.
there you go.
Fantastic, because I really want you to hear this.
Yeah.
A lot of patience and communication. How, what was like the age gap?
Hold on, there we go.
How did you face that?
I never necessarily ever faced it because he kind of died in June of last year, so we never got to like say sorries or anything. And I've never really truly overcome it because he gave me a lot of anxiety. He gave me a lot of trauma.
Yeah. So, with the trauma thing, how has it affected you, like now in the long run?
It's very scarring because he made me do a lot of messed up things. Like, and looking back on it, I always blame myself for it. And I always thought it was my fault. And I always held that blame. And I never felt like I belonged or anything.
Yeah. So I'm sure that affected your mental health a lot. Like, how did it affect your mental health?
Honestly, I had so many suicidal thoughts. I wanted to die. And I have the scars from it. It truly has not been a great experience.
Yeah.
So, what was your home life like? My home life was kind of a mess. I was in and out of my home for a good 2 years-ish, like in total. But my life, I've constantly been in and out of my house, kicked out. My dad, he was a very abusive, toxic, manipulative man who liked to hit on my family members. He was a raging alcoholic, and my mother was kind of a narcissist who played the victim a lot, which was very good for her because it manipulated me into doing the things that she wanted me to do. So my whole life has been pretty rough.
With all of this, what challenges did you have to face?
Well, I had to face like the challenges of like the bullying at school over, like your family home life situation. That was pretty stressful. And, when like your family members wouldn't come to an event, like my chorus concerts, my dad, he would never show up. I've had to deal with addictions in my family. Like I stated previously, my father was an alcoholic. Um, my cousin is absolutely messed up on drugs. There's so many like horrible things that have come with growing up in a trauma-based environment.
So how would you say you feel with your trauma? Like, how's it affected you now?
Well, it's obviously affected me a lot. I have PTSD. I'm about to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I tend to be very manipulative and toxic. I'm very much prone to addictions.
So with that, how did it affect your mental health? Like, really hard.
Like I said, I'm about to have a diagnosis for borderline personality disorder. I have PTSD. I've been suicidal. I've, tried to hurt myself and others. I've had 2 failed suicide attempts. I'm not trusted around medicine. Just a whole bunch of stuff that's like been the result of the trauma that I faced.
Yeah.
So this was just a couple of my girls, and this isn't unusual for our kids. The fact that they were willing to share that is pretty powerful to me. So this kind of stress or trauma that they kind of talked about and know in their backgrounds is what we call toxic stress. It results from repeated trauma where your body never has time to fully recover. This is a short video. Everything I'm doing is going to be really short video on the way, so you can see like what happens to your body when you're faced with this repeated. Oh, I bet you can't. Do I have to reshare that too? No, we're good.
It's it was showing as muted though, so.
Oh, got it. I'm not even here.
And the positive experiences in our earliest years actually help build brain architecture. So does that mean negative experiences can weaken brain architecture? The answer is yes, and the culprit is certain kinds of stress. The body and brain respond to stress by raising the heartbeat, pumping out adrenaline, and sending out stress hormones like cortisol, preparing us to act in a crisis. One kind of stress, called positive stress, is beneficial. It's normal and healthy for children to face challenges like meeting new people or attending the first day of school. The stress responses triggered by these events are usually short and not too severe. This kind of stress is positive because it prepares the brain and body for stressful situations later in life.
There are kind of these multiple phases of stress. So we have kind of what we call good stress, which is this kind of controllable stress in our lives, things like studying for a test, solving a problem. At the time, we may not like them, but the reality of it is that we grow from them, we develop adaptive coping skills, and they kind of benefit us in the long run.
Children surrounded by caring adults experience positive stress in ways that benefit and strengthen their brain architecture. It's how we prepare our brains and bodies for other stressful events that we will experience throughout life. Sometimes children face more serious events. Think of a bad accident or a tragedy like a death in the family or a natural disaster. These events can cause a more severe stress response with the potential to last a long time and come back often. Support from caregivers can buffer the severity of the stress response and help keep stress levels under control. If the stress is kept in check, it won't do lasting damage to the child's brain and body. That's called tolerable stress.
And so this is things that are bad, but they're the kind of things we can't avoid, like the death of our parents or moving away from home, things that everyone goes through. And they're not positive. They're kind of negative in value, but they're the kind of things that everyone goes through. We can all kind of support each other, and they're made a lot easier by support networks and, coping skills and stuff like that.
The attention and support of caregivers prevents tolerable stress from causing lasting harm to developing brains. A third kind of stress is called toxic stress. It occurs during repeated exposure to bad situations like abuse, neglect, or serious hardship. If no supportive adults are around to help buffer the stress response, the hormone levels stay dangerously high. Severe stress is especially toxic if it occurs often and lingers for a long time. That can have a negative impact on brain architecture and on other systems in the body. Toxic stress can cause serious health problems later in life.
These are things that are like pervasive, typically very uncontrollable and unpredictable, abusive relationships, poverty, loss of job, loss of social status, things like this, which are kind of beyond our control and are very pervasive in our life and really kind of have this detrimental effect on us.
Toxic stress can weaken developing brain architecture and damage other body systems in young children. The effects can be a lifetime of health challenges, including physical and mental health problems and even addiction.
Many of our students face this kind of toxic stress every day, and very few have supportive adults to help them navigate the really hard events that have happened to them. What we most often see as a result of that are students with constant headaches, stomach aches, panic attacks, refusal to eat. We have addictions, and it's that we see passed down from generation to generation. So child trauma occurs probably more than you think. Get back out here. Get full screen. Child trauma occurs probably more than you think. More than 2/3 of children reported at least one of these traumatic events by the age of 16. So I'll let you sort of look at that list. I don't think it's anything that is surprising. Just a minute. So Dr. Pat Ogden says that when we are threatened, when we feel in danger, or we are about to get attacked, our thinking brain goes offline and our subcortical brain takes over. That's the area of our instincts, which are very much bodily based. So we stop thinking and we freeze, or we run, or we fight back. Our physiological arousal is strongly affected, and it shoots up to prepare our bodies for action. We all know this as fight, flight, or freeze. And they've now added a fourth category, which is called fawn. And while the other three are pretty self-explanatory, fawn is a newer idea. And it's for those who appease the threat. They're the people pleasers, the codependent, the people who lack boundaries, okay? So when those things occur consistently, right, the brain never has time to recover. And that's where trauma, that's what causes the trauma. So the brain is a hierarchical structure, and I'm not a brain scientist, but this is the simplest way I know to explain it, in which the needs of the lower level must be met before moving upwards through the structure. So when we feel frightened or threatened, the brain signals the body to release the stress hormones. You saw that in the previous, cortisol and adrenaline. So cortisol damages the cells in the hippocampus. That's the part of the brain that's responsible for laying down and integrating memory. Learning occurs in the frontal and prefrontal cortex regions. Those are the highest levels of the brain. However, the threat detection system resides in the subcortical region of the brain. You've all seen this in the classroom. The kid that comes in with his hood up, puts his head down, refuses to engage, wants to be invisible, right? This kid has disassociated with what's happening around him. The other end of the spectrum are those kids who come in and are always moving, can't sit still, can't stop talking. They are hyper aroused. Both of those are trauma responses, and very little instruction can get to the higher levels of the brain when that is occurring. Unless teachers meet the need for safety, a student will continue to operate from the lowest region of the brain, and stress chemicals will hijack the cortical regions. When this occurs, learning becomes virtually impossible. And when this occurs in very young children, it can actually rewire the brain. You know, this is just a layman's picture of it, but when I've seen so many more incidences of processing disabilities, of ADHD, of you know, the inability to retain or long-term memory, you see that if this has been happening in the brain, then very little of that can take place in the normal progression. So where do we start in trying to understand trauma? I know that you've all heard about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, so I won't spend a ton of time on this, but here's, again, just a short video. Try to look at this and identify how many of the experiences on the list have been a part of your own story, or think about others you've known and the impact that trauma has had on their lives. Again, very short snippet.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. Anda and Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood.
So we know that many of our students are coming to us with high ACE scores, at least my students are, and complex trauma. But remember what we stated earlier. Teachers aren't therapists, nor are we social workers. Our role as teachers is twofold: to facilitate the learning process and to create growth opportunities. What we need to be concerned with is how the experienced trauma affects teaching and learning, and find strategies and skills that will allow us to meet our responsibilities more effectively for all of our students. What a trauma-impacted student experiences on day one is what builds the trust and safety for them to make it through the course. Without a feeling of safety, learning will be difficult. We've talked about that, right? If not impossible to achieve for many students. Students are asking themselves, these kinds of questions the minute they walk into your classroom. Does this person know my name? Do I belong? Do I have what it takes to do this? Will I be safe if I mess up? Does this person care about me and respect me as a person? This kind of connection with students allows movement through the limbic system or the emotional brain, and will enable the student to begin operating from the thinking brain. Often a quick check-in at the beginning of class can be incredibly powerful. When that happens, students can move into a learning mode more quickly. All of my teachers stand in the hallway when kids arrive. We all address them by name. We ask them about their weekend or things that we know. We make those connections so that we are more likely to get a thinking brain engaged. Creating a growth mindset in students who have believed that they are failures, that they will not succeed even if they work hard, is incredibly challenging. But I want to be every kid's cheerleader. My belief in a child's ability to grow, along with genuinely valuing them for who they are, can carry a student until they believe in themselves. This is something I did with my own kids, and I've continued to do it with the students in my school. However long this takes, I'm determined to hang in there and be on their team. And I tell you, as I'm writing this, there are a couple kids that are kind of pushing it to the nth degree, right? But I know I've got to hang in there for them, right? So we work with a variety of students having every imaginable trigger from every imaginable background. Now, if these kids weren't successful in a traditional high school with traditional strategies, traditional college practices won't exactly ensure success either. When I was subbing in a business class one day earlier in the year, we were working on personality inventories. And overall, the profile of these kids was that they were rugged individualists and couldn't do anything they didn't see value in. They are incredibly resilient, independent, and self-supporting, just not in the way we necessarily need them to be. When you couple those qualities with their lack of trust in most adults and their ADD-like symptoms that come from kids who experience toxic stress, it's not surprising that they can't pull off the compliance that it takes to conform in a traditional setting. So I think it starts with having some common agreements. When we can agree on a few basic things, I think it's easier to collaborate and find solutions. So here are my list of agreements. And you can guess, I don't have a lot of a thumb up, thumb down. Some students have not been successful in traditional settings. I think we can agree. For some students, punitive measures have proven unsuccessful to change behavior. Truancy and the pandemic have left significant gaps in academics. Childhood trauma interrupts healthy childhood development. Toxic stress results in significant mental health issues. continuing to use the same strategies that have worked that haven't worked in the past wastes precious time. And the kids that you work with are worth the effort. I just added that last one because I thought, we've got to remember that, like back to that big why. So if we agree to these statements, then we have to change the way that we work with kids who fit this profile. So let's circle back to our big why. My big why has always been to give kids who are at the greatest risk an opportunity to change the trajectory of their lives through educational pursuits. Always been my big why. You see, I was a kid with multiple ACEs, and I started in a community college and had to navigate that whole world all on my own. Because of that, I'm willing to put in some extra time with these kids in the hope that I can be the one that helps them see a different future. As educators in 2023, I think we all have to ask ourselves if we're willing to do that. So how do I measure success? I want you to listen, and I think you'll be able to hear this, I hope. So last year for our graduates, we had them just give us an audio. None of them would ever stand up and speak in front of anybody. So we did some audio recordings to tell them why, how Davidson River had made a difference in their lives. So I'll just let you listen to, these are very short.
Hi, my name is Julietta
Can you hear that?
Lopez. At Davidson River, I had to overcome a bunch of anxiety that I have built up in my head, but I had so much comfort and care from the people around me and the teachers that cared so dearly about me, and they totally understood how I felt, and they definitely made me feel more welcome in anything I need. I would describe Davidson River as a very authentic, realist school, because everybody here has went through their own struggles and their own pain, and we can all empathize and relate with each other, and that's what makes Davidson River so special, is the understanding of the teachers and the students when you walk through the door.
And one more.
Hello, my name is Zykees Yates. I've been here for 4 years, so I didn't really have great grades in my first few years. My third year is when I really started turning it around and paying attention to more stuff in class. My grades are pretty up there. I'm graduating, and hopefully I get more in life after this,
Was there any particular staff member that really helped you when you decided it was time to take ownership of your education?
There's a couple of them. Miss Tamika, big shout out to her. Miss Grimm, definitely big shout out to her. She's been the biggest supporter I had ever since I stepped foot in this door. I wouldn't be able to do it without her, honest.
So when we kind of talk about our big why, there it is. So you may never have a clear picture about the level of trauma that a student has experienced, but if we adopt trauma-informed practices in our classrooms, we can be sure that those who have been impacted get the support they need. Trauma can look different for everyone, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach for supporting students who have experienced trauma. But what works for students who have experienced trauma also works for students who haven't. Therefore, it's important to adopt a wide range of trauma-informed strategies. At Davidson River, we actually call them trauma-skilled. We're a trauma-skilled, which kind of takes it to the next level. We also, as educators, can't pretend that we don't get triggered, especially when we're tired or we're overwhelmed. We are human. And unlike my school setting, you're educators in a college, not a K-12 facility. Your kids don't have to be there, but rather they make a choice to attend. Also, you don't have them as a captive audience all day. Your kids don't stay on campus, which makes it even harder to connect. But even with all those factors, there are still many ways to help trauma-impacted students navigate the college setting. Oh, went backwards. So the goal with using these strategies in your classroom is to build resilience. Too often, these students hit a wall and don't have the resources to get back up and try again. These are a few areas that have been identified as problematic for trauma-impacted students. I would also contend that this affects traditional students as well, especially post-pandemic. And this is, I'm telling you, I see this every single day. They won't or don't know how to ask for help. They can't push past the wall that's in front of them. They can't separate home life from school. They can't balance work and school. And they don't know who to ask when they can't afford a book or don't have transportation. Constantly, when my kids are involved at Blue Ridge, thank goodness we have Will, because Will's a great supporter, and I'll talk a little bit more about him. But they just hit a block and they don't tell anybody. And then they drop out and they've missed that opportunity. And so all of them, they'll just fail or they'll drop out because they don't know how to navigate this world, nor do they have somebody who's going to help them. Catching a student before they get into the hole goes a long way to create success. But even then, we don't always win. Right now, I have a student who's literally one day away from graduating, and I can't get him to come in and finish his online course. His trauma brain tells him a different story than my team is telling. Even so, it doesn't mean that we won't keep trying. So what does it look like? What does a classroom look like that's trying to help kids who have been so drastically affected by trauma? While this is by no means an exhaustive list, these questions, their resulting answers, and adoption of appropriate classroom practices will surely go a long way in helping create success with trauma-impacted students. It's great that I did this yesterday. I redid it with my own staff and said, hey, take a look at these again. And is this what we're operating from? Right? Is your classroom safe? Is it free of sarcasm or cynicism? Where it's okay to make mistakes and questions are welcome? Can mastery be measured by growth? Do students have opportunities to correct work to get a better grade? Number two, do you create a way to check in with every student early in the class? Are students seen and heard by you? How do you create a connection so they are comfortable having a conversation with you and so they want to come back? Do you respond rather than react? Do you take a deep breath and a few extra moments to make a wise choice about a response? When you feel calmer, students respond accordingly. Do you connect before correcting to emphasize the value of the relationship to the students? Do you provide clear examples and expectations? That's one thing I tell you. Some kids really may not understand what you're asking them to do. And I think about that particularly in the area of writing. So many kids have such huge deficits. And the thought, it's okay, we're going to be writing our memoir. Wow, that seems so overwhelming. Do we break that down and scaffold that so that we can maintain our high standards, but give them the tools they need to reach them? Do you respond quickly when a student reaches out to you with a question? Do you provide choice? It helps all students to develop better decision-making tools. You model the process verbally with students to demonstrate the power of choice in the way you teach your standards, or how much flexibility do you have in the way that you teach your standards? Offering reasonable flexibility when facing the unexpected and acknowledging each student's unique challenges can build trust and facilitate the learning process. Do you give authentic feedback so that improvement feels possible? Do your students know exactly what they did wrong and know how to fix it the next time? And lastly, do you use questioning strategies to elicit students' perspectives without judgment to try and understand them better? Many students who have experienced trauma believe that asking questions or seeking help means that they're stupid or inferior and therefore very risky. They're not going to do it. Culture of encouragement may open up opportunities for students who would otherwise feel unsafe engaging in learning. So if you already do all these things in your classroom, that's amazing. I'm sure it shows in your relationships with your students. If this hasn't been your practice, you could start somewhere, but just be authentic, right? These kids are looking for people who they know are real. Another strategy that we use a lot here are what we call purposeful practices. So these are intentional activities that provide emotional regulation opportunities. We all show up with differing amounts of stress, and things that happen in the classroom can trigger reactions from us. Sometimes even the tone of our voice sometimes can make a kid feel stupid. And that's one thing, because I'm a goal directed, I like to just make things happen. And so I have to be very careful about the way I speak. Purposeful practices help students regulate and prepare to manage behavior and be able to engage in academic work. Many of us have used like a fidget spinner or done some sort of breathing activity or even doodling. Routine, and those are purposeful practices. Routines in your classroom are also purposeful practices. Kids need to know what to expect. And I've had a huge list in the resources that I've provided that Sarah will share with all of you. Some of these activities can be done in a group setting, while others may be more effective with individuals. Some are things that students can do for themselves, and others are things that the instructor can do with students. These and many others. While I realize not all the suggestions are appropriate for your age group, there should be a few that can glean from the list. You can glean from the list. So, and then one more thing is that we have a wonderful career coach in Will King. He's ours for Davidson River. He works with all of our high school students who choose to attend a college class and he becomes their champion. Will checks on the students, calls to see why they aren't attending, and works to help keep them on track. So if you have a student like that, reach out to either your success counselor, your career counselor. There may be other people that will do the other heavy lifting for you and really looking at grades, trying to figure out. I think that's through the Watermark. I might be talking sort of out of turn, the Student Success and Engagement Program at Blue Ridge. It's a great opportunity. Good resources for you to continue to connect with your students. Finally, trauma is not destiny. And its effects can be minimized, especially with support and care from others. All students face challenges as they transition into college, but it can be all the more difficult for those who arrive on campus with a history of trauma and a lack of family support. Many of these students are also returning home every day to the same settings that have created the trauma. Your support can go a long way in helping them develop resilience and the belief that they can be more than the stories others have told about them. So I want to finish with this story. This past summer, I had the pleasure of taking my 4- and 6-year-old granddaughters tent camping to Mammoth Cave. Now, these girls are not sisters. They are cousins, and they were good to go for about the first 30 minutes. After that, we had to pull out a huge bag of tricks, reaching way back to when we managed the behaviors of our own 4 children. These girls are only children. They're very strong-willed, and they're very smart. My sons and their wives are as different as night and day. One is black and white, the other one is gray. Different philosophies, different parenting styles, different priorities, and different bedtime routines. My husband and I had to figure out their triggers, the best way to redirect, and what carrots we could dangle. I quickly understood that I needed to figure out some effective strategies to manage their behaviors, or we were going to have a pretty miserable week. When you're family, though, you'll try a lot of things to help them work through whatever it is that's bothering them. That's exactly what we do when we're working with our kids at Davidson River. And I'm determined to do that with my trauma-impacted students. Most of these kids' families are kind of a mess. So we determined that we would be their family for whatever time they were with us and dig into my deep bag of tricks to provide stronger support for those who have faced traumatic situations. So when I dig in, I have a few goals that guide the tools that I use. and as a staff, this is what, again, we have agreed to. We want to allow our students to feel loved and cared for, help them learn to trust adults and each other, build bridges to their future, give them more tools to become successful adults, and help them overcome the broken places. You know, that's not just about being a better educator. It's about being a better human being. And when I look at my big why, I can think of nothing better than to hear one of my students say that I made a difference in their lives. I hope that's your desire too. So I kind of put, we're almost out of time, right on the money. I asked if there's one thing you could change in your school that could truly impact your kids. Just even think about your own classroom. If there's one thing that you could do in your classroom that would truly impact kids, what would it be? And I'd love for you to stick something in the chat if you could. Also, I want to thank the staff of Blue Ridge Community College for having me here today. Don't hesitate to reach out to my email or in the chat if you have any further questions. I appreciate the time you've spent today. I hope it's been helpful.
Barbara, thank you so much. And I do encourage folks to kind of reflect and think about what's one thing that they could even do in their own classroom, like, or in their own courses or in their own area. We do have a number of staff on this call. What's something that you could change, that you've got the local power to change in your area, that could be in response to what you've learned today? And please put that in the chat. That would be great. We really appreciate everything you've shared with us today, Barbara, and we so value the relationship that we have. And I think with Davidson River School, and we want to see more of your students as they make decisions about their future. We want to support them and all the students in our region who choose to pursue post-secondary education. So we hope to continue conversations and learn more from you and hope to be good partners to you.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. That's, we know that our kids will all start at the community college level. They just don't have, very few have what it takes to navigate going away, living away. I have to tell the story real quickly. My oldest son got a full ride to Georgia Tech. Thought his future was sealed. Navy scholarship, and he was going to go ROTC, and he hit the wall so hard and came back at the end of the semester with a 1.5. And when I look at what happened, I knew he didn't have the grit, right? He didn't have that. He had a fixed mindset that said, this is what I know. And he didn't use that. He didn't know how to ask for help because he hadn't had to ask for help. There's a lot of things in that, right? Mm-hmm. So trying to find that way to help them through those times when they really break or hit that wall because they just don't know the questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate, again, the opportunity to impact in any way where my kids will go and the folks that understand them a little bit better.
I want to share, an invitation to all of those who have attended today's session. If you have questions for Barbara, feel free. If you don't have time to put them in the chat, you're also very welcome to send them to me and I can pass them along to her. Just based on my, few interactions with her over the last couple of months getting this planned, I'm very confident that she means what she says when she says, please reach out. I think she'll continue to support us because this is her life's work.
Well, and when we realize that and I didn't say this, but these kids are staying in our community, right? This is our community. So, those 4-year kids, they're not coming back here because there's not necessarily a job for them here. But our community college kids, our kids that come out of Davidson River, this is where they'll be. And I feel, this is our community to really work as a team, do the best we can to give them the opportunities that can make their lives better.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I want to thank everybody. It is 4 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and